Look at a map of the United States. I mean, it is almost impossible to find a town, a city, or even just a lonely stretch of highway that hasn't been, fundamentally altered by one family.
Oh, absolutely. It's everywhere.
Right. We usually think of geography as being shaped by rivers and mountains. But in modern America, it's really shaped by retail. And as of January 2026, the Walton family holds a net worth of around $440.62 billion.
That's billion with a B.
Yeah, with a B. It is a number so large that the human brain actually struggles to conceptualize it. So welcome to the deep dive. We are so glad you're here with us today because we are dissecting the historical record to understand how that kind of economic gravity is actually manufactured.
Because when you get into the hundreds of billions, you're no longer talking about mere wealth. You are talking about the economic equivalent of a nation state.
Yeah, exactly.
And our source material today, which is the Wikipedia page for Sam Walton, it provides the literal blueprint for how that nation state was built. Our mission here is to explore the specific, grinding mechanics of how a boy who grew up milking cows during the Great Depression ended up forging Walmart Stores, Inc.
The largest corporation by revenue in the world.
Right. And the biggest private employer on Earth. It's not just a biography, it's an exploration of sheer survival.
The scale of what he achieved is it's almost science fiction. At the time of Walton's death in 1992, his company had 400,000 employees.
Wow.
And they were generating nearly $50 billion in annual sales from over 1,900 stores. You don't build a machine that massive by accident. You build it because you were driven by something that goes, I think, way beyond normal ambition.
Yeah, ambition alone does not build a $440 billion legacy. Survival instincts do. To understand that relentless, almost terrifying drive required to build that empire, we really have to start with the economic trauma that forged its creator. Sam Walton was born in Oklahoma in 1918, but his early life was defined entirely by the financial devastation of the Great Depression.
Which was brutal for farming communities.
It was. His father, Thomas Walton, couldn't make enough money farming to support the family, so he had to pivot to a job that carries an incredibly heavy psychological weight. He went into farm mortgaging for Metropolitan Life Insurance.
Wait, which meant his father was the guy actually foreclosing on farms?
Exactly.
Wow. He was the one showing up to take away people's livelihoods during the worst economic crisis in American history. That is a heavy burden for a family to carry.
Oh, massive. They were constantly moving from one small Missouri town to another because of that job. And while his father was doing that, young Sam was doing literally everything he could to help the family merely survive.
Just to make ends meet.
Right. He was milking the family cow, bottling the surplus milk, driving it to customers. He was walking a paper route for the Columbia Daily Tribune.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because I think it's so easy for us today to view that specific part of his life through the lens of modern side hustle culture.
Oh, for sure.
We have this tendency to romanticize it, right? We see a teenager doing 3 jobs and think, oh, wow, what a born entrepreneur. He's on his grind.
Like a startup founder in a garage.
Exactly. But I really want to push back on that glamorization. For Walton, this wasn't some cute startup mentality. When your father is the man foreclosing on ruined families, you are getting a front row seat to absolute financial destruction.
You're seeing what happens when the money runs out.
Yes. Learning to be what Walton later called a giver rather than a taker for his family was about pure survival. Watching his father take farms away from neighbors must have instilled a deep, psychological, almost existential fear of financial failure. You learn very quickly that if you don't control your environment will crush you.
That is such a crucial point. And you see this absolute refusal to be at the mercy of others manifest again and again in his early years. It wasn't just in business. Look at his youth. He didn't just survive his transient childhood. He methodically mastered every single hierarchy he entered.
Right, he was super involved.
Extremely. While in the 8th grade in Missouri, he became the youngest Eagle Scout in the state's history.
Of course he did.
Yeah. And by the time he graduated high school, he was voted most versatile boy. He goes to the University of Missouri and doesn't just participate. He joins the ROTC, he joins the QEBH Secret Society, which honored the top senior men on campus, and he graduates as the permanent class president.
So he's building a resume of total control.
Exactly. Everything he touches, he attempts to dominate. He starts his retail career at JCPenney, making $75 a month before he resigns to join the Army Intelligence Corps during World War II.
And he reaches the rank of captain there, right?
He does, supervising security at aircraft plants.
Which brings us to the post-war era, where this intense discipline and survival instinct finally collide with actual opportunity. Because after the war, he takes everything he's learned and starts his own business.
Right.
But the source material reveals something fascinating here. His initial explosive success almost destroyed him. In fact, his success became his biggest liability.
Yeah, this is a crazy story. So in 1945, Walton decides to take over management of his first variety store. He's 26 years old. He secures a $20,000 loan from his father-in-law.
Which, adjusted for inflation to 2025, is a very serious $357,000.
Exactly. It's real money. He pairs that with $5,000 of his own Army savings and buys a Ben Franklin variety store franchise in Newport, Arkansas. And immediately he implements a pricing strategy that is simple, but at the time completely revolutionary for a rural area.
Right, he realized that if he offered prices that were as good as or even better than the stores in major cities that were 4 hours away by car,
Yeah.
people wouldn't make the drive.
They just stay put.
Exactly. They would simply shop at home. Combine that with a fanatical dedication to keeping the shelves consistently stocked with a wide range of goods, and the results were explosive. Sales skyrocketed from $80,000 to $225,000 in just 3 years.
But, and this is a huge but, those high sales numbers masked a fatal structural flaw in his business.
The lease.
The lease. Because Walton was a novice when he signed the original paperwork, he was paying a prohibitively high rent of 5% of his sales.
Ouch.
Yeah. In retail, where margins are famously razor thin, giving up 5% of your gross top-line revenue to a landlord is financially suffocating. And to make matters infinitely worse, he hadn't secured a renewal option on the lease.
And his landlord, a man named P.K. Holmes, who actually came from a family with a history in retail, noticed just how much money Walton's store was generating.
Oh, he definitely noticed.
Right. Holmes decided he wanted the store and the highly profitable franchise rights for his own son. Because Walton had absolutely no legal leverage without a renewal option, Holmes simply refused to renew the lease.
He just kicked him out.
Yeah, he effectively forced Walton out, making him sell his hard-earned fixtures and inventory to Holmes for a mere $50,000.
I have to throw out a speculative question for you here because the mechanics of this lease disaster just stopped me in my tracks.
Okay, let's hear it.
Was P.K. Holmes's greed actually the catalyst for the entirety of Walmart?
Oh, wow.
Think about it. If Walton had signed a smart lease with a renewal auction, or if Holmes hadn't been bullied by his own greed to steal the store for his son, does Walton just comfortably stay a single store owner in Newport forever? Does he just become the guy who runs the nicest five and dime in a small Arkansas town and calls it a life?
You know, innovation is rarely born from comfort. Often it's not unchecked success that drives a massive leap forward. It's being backed completely into a corner.
Right.
The trauma of the Great Depression taught Walton how to hustle. But the trauma of losing the Newport store taught him about structural power. He realized that it didn't matter how hard you outworked the competition or how brilliant your pricing strategy was if you didn't legally own the ground beneath your feet. He had to own the board to win the game.
Exactly. He was forced to start completely over, but he weaponized that painful lesson.
So he relocates to Bentonville, Arkansas. And this time, his terms are unbending. He finds a small discount store he wants to buy, but he flat out refuses to close the deal unless he gets a 99-year lease for the shop next door.
Just to ensure he can expand later.
Yes. A 99-year lease is basically demanding immortality for your business. He is ensuring he can never be boxed in or evicted again.
And the owner of the shop next door actually refused him 6 times.
6 times?
Yeah. Walton was entirely ready to walk away from Bentonville, to just give up on the town entirely if he couldn't get absolute control. The stakes were so high that his father-in-law, without Sam knowing, paid the shop owner a secret $20,000 bribe just to secure the lease.
That is wild.
Right. The deal goes through. They open in May 1950, and again, the growth is rapid. Sales jump from $72,000 to $175,000. But Walton encounters a new, profound geographic problem. He still had a year left on the old Newport lease.
Which was 220 miles away.
Exactly.
He is physically trapped between 2 locations. For a guy whose entire psychology is based on intimately controlling his environment to prevent failure, being 220 miles away from one of his stores must have been agonizing. He had to learn how to delegate and fast.
And he did. He brings in his brother, Bud, to help expand. And to scout new locations efficiently without wasting days on the road, Walton actually buys a second-hand airplane.
Of course, because driving takes too long.
Right. He eventually logs thousands of hours flying over the Midwest, assessing town layouts and traffic patterns from the sky. But the true masterstroke of this era was how he handled his store managers. He couldn't be in every store, so he began encouraging his managers to invest up to $1,000 of their own money into the specific stores they managed.
Here's where it gets really interesting. When you read that detail, you might just think, oh, he's raising capital to open more stores. But look at what he's actually doing psychologically.
Yep.
It really is. This is decades before Silicon Valley made stock options, the standard playbook for tech startups to retain talent. By having his managers invest their own hard cash, he was turning employees into literal co-owners.
He shifted their mindset.
Completely. From being mere operators clocking in for a wage to invested partners whose personal wealth was directly tied to the store's margins.
The psychological shift of that $1,000 investment solves the classic principal-agent problem in business. When a manager feels like an owner, their behavior completely changes.
They care about the electric bill.
Yes. They turn off the lights in the back room. They negotiate harder with local vendors. They don't let inventory spoil. Walton essentially took the survival mentality he learned as a kid milking cows and decentralized it. He planted that exact same urgent drive into the minds of every manager in his growing chain.
And it worked. By 1962, he and his brother owned 16 stores across Arkansas, Missouri, and Kansas. He had mastered how to manage a scattered, decentralized network.
He's got the hyper-invested managers, he's got the aerial scouting from his plane, he's got the unyielding drive. But to scale infinitely, he needs a new structural model.
In the source notes, he finds that inspiration from a competitor, right?
He does. In 1962, the first true Walmart opens in Rogers, Arkansas. Walton had been watching the Meijer chain closely and acknowledged that his new format was directly inspired by Meijer's innovative one-stop shopping center concept.
Okay, so he takes that concept, but he uses it to completely rewrite the geographical rules of American retail.
Yes. The conventional wisdom at the time was undisputed. If you want to build a massive retail empire, you go where the people are. You build in the big cities. You fight for heavy foot traffic in major metropolitan centers.
And Walton looked at the map and did the exact opposite.
The exact opposite. He targeted small rural towns. His strategy was brilliant in its ruthless spatial economics. He figured out that if a store was large enough and offered enough variety at a severely discounted price, it could entirely control the business of a small town and its surrounding rural area. By establishing a massive, undeniable footprint in a small market, he actively discouraged any and all other competitors from even attempting to enter that market.
So what does this all mean? It means he wasn't just building stores, he was building a local monopoly. He was dropping an inescapable gravity well into every town he touched.
That's a great way to put it.
Because if you are the only massive retailer within a 50-mile radius, you own that regional economy. But that strategy presents a massive logistical nightmare. The Achilles heel of small-town retail is the supply chain. It is incredibly expensive to ship goods out to the middle of nowhere.
Right. The spatial economics of rural supply chains usually kill discount models because the shipping overhead eats the profit margin. So Walton built an incredible proprietary logistical network to bypass the problem entirely.
How did he pull that off?
He mandated that new stores had to be located within a single day's drive of a Walmart regional warehouse. That specific parameter, a day's drive, is crucial.
So they don't have to pay for overnight stays.
Exactly. A single truck driver can leave the warehouse, supply a store, and return in one shift, cutting out overnight overhead. And instead of relying on third-party shipping companies who take their own cut, Walmart distributed everything through their own internal trucking service.
I really want you to think about how far ahead of his time this is. Today, we look at tech giants and marvel at their algorithmic supply chains, their predictive shipping, their tightly controlled next-day delivery networks.
Oh yeah, we treat it like magic.
We really do. We treat it like it's a miracle of the digital age. But Sam Walton was effectively building an analog version of that exact same system using small-town highways, physical maps, and his own fleet of trucks. He controlled the entire ecosystem from the moment a product hit the warehouse shelf to the moment it landed in the customer's shopping cart.
And controlling that physical ecosystem allowed for unprecedented volume buying. Because he owned the trucks and the warehouses, he could negotiate with manufacturers to buy goods in massive quantities at steep discounts.
Passing the savings to the customer.
Exactly. He could pass those savings directly to the customer, undercutting any local competition, while still maintaining his own margins because his logistics were so incredibly cheap.
It's a perfect loop.
It is. That logistics model is the engine that sparked the real explosion. From 1977 to 1985, Walmart grew from 190 stores to 800 stores. It is exponential growth fueled by logistical mastery.
But with that kind of scale comes a footprint that is impossible to ignore. I mean, you can't drop 800 monolithic stores into small-town America without fundamentally altering the fabric of those communities.
No, you can't. The model was so effective that it gave birth to a phenomenon economists literally dubbed the Walmart effect.
Right.
Because of its sheer scale, volume buying, and economic gravity, whenever Walmart established a store in a new region, it drastically altered the local economy. The sources note that these impacts are heavily studied. They encompass both profound positive effects, such as significantly lowering the cost of living for residents by providing cheaper goods, and severe negative effects.
Mainly the closure of small businesses, right? Yep.
Yes, primarily the disruption and closure of existing local independent businesses. It is a fundamental reshaping of a regional economy by a single corporate entity.
And what's fascinating about the man behind this monolith is how he viewed his own role in it. You might expect a cutthroat, corporate raider mentality, but the sources show a man driven by a deeply held, almost absolute sense of duty. His unrelenting drive was deeply intertwined with his faith.
Very much so. He was a highly active member of the First Presbyterian Church in Bentonville, serving as an elder and a Sunday school teacher for high schoolers.
Wow, even while running the company.
Oh, even then. He infused his corporate structure with a concept he called service leadership, drawn directly from his religious beliefs. He genuinely believed in the importance of serving others. He framed his relentless pursuit of lower prices as a moral service to the working-class families who shopped at his stores. He built that ideology into the bedrock of his corporate culture.
And the financial reality of that massive service engine was undeniable. From 1982 to 1988, Forbes named Sam Walton the richest person in the United States.
And the only reason he lost the title in 1989 was because Forbes changed their methodology.
Right, they started crediting his fortune jointly with his 4 children. But the wealth was compounding at a rate the country had rarely seen.
And his influence was recognized at the highest levels of government. In March 1992, he received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from George H.W. Bush.
But by this time, his health was rapidly failing.
Yeah, it was. He had been battling severe illnesses for a decade. He was diagnosed with hairy cell leukemia in 1982 and then bone cancer in 1990.
That's rough.
He endured grueling radiation and chemotherapy at MD Anderson Cancer Center. But his obsession with the retail empire he built, that deeply ingrained need to monitor and control his environment, never faded, not even as his body gave out.
He passed away on April 5th, 1992, at the age of 74, from multiple myeloma. And the detail from the source material that just stays with me is from his final days.
The hospital bed story.
Yes. According to his son, just days before his death, Sam Walton was lying in his hospital bed. He's battling bone cancer and blood cancer. He's arguably the most successful businessman of his century. He has the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And what is he doing?
He's not resting.
No, he's not resting. He's not reflecting on his legacy. He is actively reviewing store-level sales data.
It is the ultimate manifestation of the psychology we discussed at the very beginning. The boy who survived the Great Depression, hustling to sell surplus milk to keep his family afloat, could never stop checking the ledgers.
He couldn't turn it off.
He really couldn't. The drive wasn't a switch he could just flip once he reached $1 billion or $10 billion. The fear of failure and the need to maintain absolute control over the margins was his default state of being.
It's a profound juxtaposition. Here is a man recognized as one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people of the 20th century. He completely rewired the global supply chain. Yet, in his final conscious moments, he is still agonizing over the granular day-to-day data of individual stores.
Yeah.
In his mind, he was still the store manager, trying to make sure the shelves were stocked and the margins were holding against the encroaching dark.
So true. If we synthesize the core takeaways from the source material, it becomes clear that Sam Walton's empire wasn't built on a single mythical stroke of genius. It was built on a compounding series of resilient, highly mechanical pivots.
Right, he adapted constantly.
Exactly. He weaponized the traumatic lessons of extreme poverty to create a culture of intense efficiency. When a devastating real estate loss threatened to end his career in Newport, he turned it into an unshakable strategy of absolute ownership and 99-year leases.
Unprecedented control.
And by recognizing the untapped potential of rural America, he pioneered an analog logistics network of trucks and regional warehouses that systematically conquered small-town economies. He didn't just build a company, he engineered an entirely new physical infrastructure for how goods move across a continent.
Which brings us right back to that map of the United States, irrevocably changed by those 800, then 1900, and now thousands upon thousands of stores. We talked about the Walmart effect, the profound economic impacts, both the lowered cost of living and the disrupted local businesses that arrive when this massive logistical machine enters a region.
It changes everything.
It does. Knowing what we know now, that Walton purposefully targeted small towns specifically to create local monopolies and ensure no competitors could survive alongside him, I want to leave you with a question to ponder on your own. When a single corporation perfects its logistics and its pricing to the point of achieving total local dominance, does that ultimate efficiency ultimately serve the community by giving them the lowest possible prices? Or does it permanently trap them in an ecosystem where they have absolutely no other choice?
That's the big question.
The map has been redrawn, and we are all living in the geography he created.